آقای دکتر ابراهیم فتحی Associate Professor at West Virginia University. تایتل تاکشون از Climate Change and Strategy هستش Fueling Tomorrow Energy Mix Transition and Sustainable Solutions. ترجمه گوگل که میشه سوخت فردا، ترکیب انرژی، انتقال و راه حل‌های پایدار. Dr. Ebrahim is Associate Professor at West Virginia University, leading expert in sustainable energy solutions, with extensive practical experience in carbon capture, utilization, and storage, engineered geothermal systems, AI-driven data analysis, and hydraulic fracking. همه اینها که می‌دونیم به هر حال مسائل بسیار جالبی هست که عمدتاً صحبتشون در مورد راه‌حل‌های انرژی‌های ماندگار و ضبط و ذخیره و استفاده از کربن هستش. اصولاً در مورد تغییرات جوی و محیط زیستی و استراتژی پرداختن به آنها. بخاطر خیلی خوشحال هستم دیگه من وقت شما رو نمیگیرم. هر موضوع دیگر بعد البته بعدها شما دیدید توی اعلامی که شد ایشون اواردهای مختلف داشتن و فاندینگ هم که دارن از دپارتمان انرژی از بسیار جای دیگه. چیزی که برای من جالب بود این که ایشون به هر حال دانشگاه وست ویرجینیا هستن، اونجا تو رشته به هر حال رشته‌ای که هست عمدتاً منابع انرژی کلاسیک به هر حال چی میگن فسایل فیول همه اینها و برای من جالبه که به نظر میاد دارن اینها انتقال پیدا بکنه به یه دوره‌ای که برای میرن به سمت انرژی‌های پایدار و رینیوبل بسیار برای من جالبه که و ما میشنویم و سوال ازتون خیلی میکنیم. خیلی متشکرم، بفرمایید.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Just 1 second to switch this before we start.
این هم لیزر اگه آرام شیطانی کرد میتونید خلاصه ضبطش کنید. بفرمایید.
Sure. Thank you so much.
ابراهیم جان عذرخواهی میکنم ما صفحه شما رو نمیبینیم.
Okay.
هایبرید هست که برای
One more time. How about now?
عالی، بفرمایید. Good luck. مرسی.
Great. Thank you so much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for attending this late Friday evening lecture. So I'll try to be quick and short. I try to, but it's not my regular practice. So the talk tonight is about fueling tomorrow energy mix transition and sustainable solutions. As Dr. Manager said, I'm Ebrahim Fathi, and my background is in mining. I have my mining engineering background from Tehran University and the master's from Tehran University in oil and gas. And I completed my PhD in Oklahoma University getting oil and gas petroleum. And majority of work that I have done is on conventional and unconventional oil and gas reservoirs. However, since 6, 7, 8 years ago, all the discussions regarding the climate change and global warming basically got more highlighted, and everybody started talking about these topics. And in light of that, government also start putting some initiation in this, what they call energy transition, which I'm going to talk about that. I'm not in favor of the transition word, and I'll tell you why. But I prefer energy mixing. But from that time, you start getting into renewable energy. So majority of my projects are in geothermal energy. Actually, we drilled the first geothermal well in the eastern United States Appalachian Basin in Morgantown, West Virginia. That's the first geothermal well. We are working on a couple of more projects in that And we are also working on multiple projects regarding carbon capture and sequestration. So these are majority driven by the government because most of these projects are not economically viable with the current technology at this time. However, we are in the path to get to that point. And
Can we ask a question while you talk? I think.
how long?
It's okay. No, I think it's an important point I want to make it. Sorry. So this is going on. So when you say it's government, this is a funding, an award that you got competitively and you just.
Sure. Yeah, these are basically the US government start promoting this energy transition. There are lots of opportunities from Department of Energy, NSF, for the researchers to start looking at developing these technologies, implementing these technologies, and then practicing and distributing technologies over the US. So we have, I've been involved in at least 2 projects, which was in the development phase, implementation phase, and the project that I'm working currently is in the field scale, actually, practically producing heat for the university and for other resources that requires this. So the topic is kind of blend of all, but I just want to try to put this in a perspective that we slightly getting away from what media is imposing and looking at the regular facts and the data that we covered, that we covered and collected during the year. So the global warming is a term, is a buzz term that everybody's talking about, everybody is interested. But still there are so many people and group of people, they don't believe in that. So the claim is, okay, if you are looking at the historical behavior of the temperature, you would see decades of temperature increasing and then temperature decreasing. And the claim is, okay, this could be one of those cycles. So there are discussions on that, but practically looking at the data, looking at what has been recovered, tells us something that we can believe the global warming is actually a fact. And what that is, the first thing is simply by looking at the temperature of the Earth. We are looking at the average surface temperature globally. And we are looking at how this temperature is changing. So this data is showing from 1880s all the way to 2022. Wherever you have the blue, it means the average surface temperature globally is cooler. And when it starts getting red, it's basically getting hotter. So as you can see, starting 1880s, we have some cold surface areas. And then it started 1940, picking up with the warm years. And after 1980s, actually shooting up. How much it goes up? From the start of the Industrial Revolution, where we actually start working, building, and developing the factories, using the fossil fuels, and burning those, we will see that this trend of increasing the temperature. But how much that temperature has gone up? The temperature has gone up about 1.04 degrees Celsius. Okay, so all these global warmings that we're talking about 1 degree Celsius, okay? But is it important? So we want to see what is the effect of that 1 degree Celsius. So here again, there's another curve which basically shows the historical data. Again, this is the observed temperature. And then it also shows us the predictions. So people are looking at these trends with the development of the countries. They're predicting how much the temperature will go up. So the predictions are that the temperature could go up by 5 degrees Celsius by 2100, or it could go up by 1 degree and 1.5 degrees Celsius. So the range of variability really depends on how much effort the countries are putting to mitigate these global warming and how much they're not. And there are indications. They collect the data after all these events going on, international events. They're looking at the governments, the policies, and the trends of the industry, and they were making these adjustments. So this is basically the range that we're talking between 1.5 to 3.5 degrees Celsius. We are expecting the average temperature at the surface globally goes up. But why it's going up? Okay, so there are different discussions why the temperature goes up. Okay, but the scientists looking at the data, especially looking at the data that correlates to the industrial revolution, we will see that there is a kind of a direct relationship between the temperature, this is again the increase in the temperature, and the amount of CO2 emissions that we have exist. So basically, we are saying that as the CO2 emissions goes up, the temperature, even though it's fluctuating, but the trend is increasing. So they see there's a direct relationship between the CO2 emission and global warming and increasing the temperature. And then you're looking at the physics of it. So we know as we increase the CO2 emissions, not just CO2, basically it's greenhouse gases, which will go over it. These greenhouse gases, they start reflecting. The temperature is just generating something like trapping the heat. And that heat trapment basically on the surface generates this increase in the temperature. So we see that the data actually shows there's a direct relationship between the increasing temperature and the amount of CO2. But again, how much? So for 1 degree Celsius. We're talking about the CO2 concentration. We are saying that CO2 is going up. How much is going up? Basically, we're looking at the data from 280 ppm before industrial revolution. The amount has increased to 419 ppm, which is a part per million. Okay. So again, not much if you're looking at that sense. But this simple 1 degree C and double in the concentration of CO2 resulted in melting the sea ice cover by more than 51%. So only 1 degree Celsius increase in the temperature of the surface resulted in 51% of ice to melt it. And that amount has led to increase in the sea level by 8.8 centimeters to be exact. Okay. And this has a huge impact environmentally and socially and economically. Okay, we'll look at it. So this is a very nice picture. I love it. One of actually Iranians, Nima Sarikhani, took this picture, and it came out as a picture of the year. So, and we will see that this is basically some resemble of all these global warmings and the impact of it. Very impactful picture. But this is not only the impact that we see from that 1 degree Celsius increase. We have so many events of wildfires. We have seen 1 year ago actually in Canada, which we'll see how much CO2 pollution that's generated. The droughts, and also the tornadoes, hurricanes, and all that are the result of this 1 degree Celsius increase. So it's not just 1 degree Celsius that we look at the temperature and we're like, okay, what a big deal. It really impacts the life of the people. And this is actually, again, a picture from NASA, which says that the Canadian fire released more carbon in 5 months than Russia and Japan estimated total CO2 emission from all the fossil fuels used in the whole year of 2022. So it's not just we try to eliminate the fossil fuel use and we say we are good. There are so many other factors impacting this, and we need to look at the whole spectrum of this global warming and the impact of it. So far, the idea was, okay, with the data, we can prove that there's a global warming, temperatures going up. And then how much it goes up, we know the rates, and we see the effects on our life. So that's basically this statement. Then the question is it just the CO2? Obviously not. There are series of gases that impact this climate change. We call them greenhouse gases in general, which includes different type of gas. But as you can see, 65% of that is related to the carbon dioxide burned from the fossil fuels. Still, there are lots of that. 18% comes from methane. What is that? So nobody talks about methane, but majority of these methanes are coming from simply flaring, burning the gas in the conventional oil and gas reservoirs, like what we have in the Middle East. We just drive down South Iran, you see all these fires. These are actually methane that they're burning. So no use, no application, no consideration. Iraq, Iran, Kuwait, majority of Middle Eastern countries they don't really care. They simply burn these gases. There are lots of plans, especially in the Arab countries like UAE, Saudi Arabia, they're taking big, huge steps in a global scale to combat the global warming, but unfortunately not in Iran. So we'll see the distribution. So CO2 and then methane are the majority. The CO2 is the first degree suspect. So that's why we are looking more toward the CO2 first. However, as I said, this is also a very important part which can be fixed rather more easily than what we have for the CO2. Okay, so who is emitting these gases? So we said like 62%, but who is doing that? So if we look at this graph, it basically shows us that that United States, China by 11.7 gigatons of CO2 is number one. And then United States by 5.06. And then European countries by 2.79, India by 2.74 are the toughest CO2 emitters of the world. And then the rest of the world are 14.7. So if we can just...
You don't have it per capita, do you?
No, it's just per country. Yeah, so these are per country. And per country, why we do it per country? Because generally, if you wanted to do any type of mitigation, most probably it comes from the government and the policies enforced by the government. So that makes more sense than dividing these based on the countries, because if we say if United States and China drop their emission, half of the CO2 problem is gone.
This number annually?
This number is from 1959 to 2021.
60 years, 60 years.
No.
These are annually. But this is cumulative. The cumulative is from the 1959 all the way to 2001.
Totally this much
emitted. And why that generally the start of Industrial Revolution is where we are referring, and then people are comparing what happened after that. So China, United States, Europe, India, big players. So why these guys are why these guys are emitting all these?
Do you have any
It's included in the rest of the world. Generally, when you're talking about the Russia, getting good numbers is a challenge. But again, we have some idea of the total, so we can infer what the number would be, but not an exact number as we have here at the chart. But why we are doing that? Simply because of the energy. We burn fossil fuels to provide energy, electricity. And United States, China, India, these are the countries are using energy more than the other countries. So there's an example I always show in my class. I say, what do you think the energy consumption per capita in Kenya, let's say? And they were giving numbers, and I was like, okay, do you think my refrigerator uses more energy? And they were like, no way, but yes, way. Because the refrigerator that we are using now with all those stores and energy savings is actually using more energy per capita than countries like Kenya and the countries in Africa. So there is a huge imbalance between the energy production, energy consumption. So this is past, this is so far, but what about the future? How do we know where we go? So in an energy area, there is an International Energy Agency and the Energy Information Administration. There are these two centers are looking on so many different things. They're looking at the technology, how the technology is advancing. Like, are we generating electricity from the steam turbine? Or now we are having more modern technology using supercritical CO2 to run and get the energy. So they're looking at all these trends, how fast these technologies are developing. They're looking at the population, how fast the population grows. They're looking at the governments, the policies, how much policy is put in place and how far they're implementing these policies. And looking at all that, they're making forecasts for the future. And looking at all this, the forecast, this is the one that I brought, is from 2020, is that whatever energy consumed, okay, going to 2050 will increase by 50%. So our energy consumption goes up by 50%. Okay. So the policy is like, okay, when you go home, turn off the light. When you're leaving the home, turn off the light. Or don't use this at this time or that time. These policies, micromanaging, they're not going to help to mitigate our climate change. Okay, these are very, very minor. In terms of the energy that we are consuming, the energy consumption will increase by 50%. You need to somehow not even produce as much as you are producing now, also catch up with this 50%. Okay, so where this comes from, the energy, currently 40% from nuclear, 25% from natural gas, which we call it clean, 31% petroleum, 27% coal, and 13% all the renewables. Okay, all the renewables together, wind, solar, hydro, geothermal, and all of them together, 13%. Okay, so at this time, because of the Biden administration, the forecast was by going to 2050, the amount of renewables will increase to 27%. Okay, so we are increasing from 13 to 27, we're doubling that. Okay, so, and we try to cut the coal. Coal is dirty gold. It generates lots of CO2. We try to cut that. Petroleum, the expectation is to cut it, but a little bit, because we are very dependent on the petroleum. And a little bit, a minor amount in the natural gas, and it's still, because of the perception of the society and all that, not much hope for the nuclear. Which again, if I would be in a position, I would put my money on the nuclear instead of the rest of the energy portfolio. Okay, so we said that this is going to be the future, but in what percentage? Where, if you look at that again, we see that the industry application, the industry usage of energy will increase by 52%, 46% in transportation, residential, and commercial. They're all going up. Looking at this graph shows how the amount of the oil and gas consumption will go up. Petroleum goes up by 40%. So whatever we are using now, the expectation is we're going to use 40% more by 2050. The renewables that we said we're going to increase it, even though it's increasing by 75%, just see how much this contributes to the whole energy portfolio. Very minor impact in compared to the natural gas, in compared to the petroleum, and in compared to the coal. And all these, just remember, these are assuming that the policies will stay, the government will not change, and we don't have to baby. Because if that's the case, then you're out of all these Paris agreements and all that. We go back to our same old business, right? So this still assumes that whatever we have on the paper from the government to go toward the renewables will stay by 2000. Okay. So that's a prospect. That is what we're facing. We need more energy. We cannot just downsize our life. We are used to this luxury life, and nobody's going to go back. You are not going to shut down. You're not going to not use transportation. So we need to find a way. And the way is to look at all these energy spectrum. Petroleum and natural gas and coal, they call it the kings. They will be there, and they will generate energy. So simply saying that ban the oil, ban the gas, ban the coal is not going to solve our problems, because the energy consumption will go up by 50%, because even we spend on the renewables, we cannot catch up with that. And people are not willing to give away. And the hydrogen, geothermal, solar, wind, nuclear, and biomass would be the other options. But so which energy source is the best? From my experience, our perspective, we are proposing energy mix, not the energy transition. Okay, and I will go over that why I'm saying this. So how do I choose this? Generally, when you are choosing the energy, you need to make sure that how much will it cost to set up and operate. Yeah, you can come up with the idea of doing this and that, but when it costs me $10 for kilowatt hour of energy, I'm not going to pay that. Nobody's going to pay that. It has to be comparable with the current market. Does this energy source requires a storage? Or is it like the natural gas or oil? You want it, you burn it. You don't want it, you turn it off. So this is basically, they call it dispatchable. Like wind. You have energy when there is a wind. Solar, you have energy when there's a sun. When there's no sun, then you need to figure out something else for coming up with the energy. Can it be produced on a large scale? We looked at those numbers. You're talking about mega and tera watt hours of energy. Can that energy generate, can that source generate this? And how will this production of energy impact our environment? So for that, people generated the measures. They look at the cost. There's a term, they call it LCOE, levelized cost of energy. Like how much it costs me if I wanted to do the solar right here for this university. From buying the panels, installing the panels, changing the whole setup to use that energy, coming to the point that this light goes on with the solar. And then not that, to the point that the solar panel is out of order and I need to dispose it and I need to bring a new one. So the whole life cycle of the energy, how much it costs. And if I need to store that, like during the day, I need to get the energy and store it in a battery and then use it at night, how much that costs. That's level of LCOS, levelized cost of storage. And then there are some federal tax credits associated with different sources of energy. Like if you are working in geothermal, you're going to get the tax credit. So that also helps in the economy of these energies. This table, very messy, but what we need to just pay attention is the last column, which basically tells us how much it costs for us to use a specific source of energy to generate electricity. Okay, For example, if I want to use advanced nuclear, right now it's $81. If I wanted to use geothermal, that's 37. Wind in the offshore, it goes to 105. So if I look at this table, I can simply see that the natural gas is a good chance. And then there's a geothermal. So these ones, they call it dispatchable technologies. These ones are resource constraints. So dispatchable, again, as I said, it's like it has a switch. You can on it or off. If you need it, you on it. If you don't need it. The resource constraints, these are like wind, solar, right? So between those, we can see that like solar standalone with $33 is kind of comparable with the federal tax. And then there are some technologies which basically use it on a time by time basis, like when you need it, when the demand is really high, then you can simply go to the combustion turbine and feed the demand. And then when the demand is down, just turn it on. Okay. And the other thing is like the storage, as I said, it's very important. You know, you all need to store, and the storage of, let's say, the energy from the wind and the solar is very costly. That part, nobody, people, they really don't see that, how much it costs for you to store that, and how big of those batteries are, and how much of the land use and environmental impact they will have. The other thing is the scalability. Again, we are looking at that. We wanted to see that it's scalable. It can feed a house, a town, university, state. What is the scale of that energy? Okay. And obviously the environment. We also wanted to look at the footprints, not just CO2 emissions, like the sound pollution, air, water, and land use. Okay. And we all heard about all the things about the fossil fuels burning, so it comes out, but not much about the solar panels. The solar panels actually, they are made of very toxic heavy metals. And the amount of pollution that they generate is far beyond what the CO2 and the fossil fuels can do. And just changing the landscape, just changing the use of the land, where the animals, the other habitats are like living, and just turning that to something like this solar farm in Arkansas, it's another thing that people, they don't see that value. But it comes to the point when you start seeing. But this is not it, because this can happen. This happened 2017 after the Hurricane Maria in San Puerto Rico. And then what happened? All the solar panels gone. It was a heavy rain, all the heavy metals, everything to the water resource. And the estimates are billions of dollars. If you go to the report, it basically gives you the estimate of billions of dollars required to just recover from that damage. That's not, I assume not, but these are heavy metals.
They've been washed away by the.
Into the water, into your water, and then they will present as a very, very small concentration. And then you have to spend, again, a lot of money to separate those from the sources, if you can find where they have gone, and then try to clean it. And the same happened in California in 2015, where 200,000 solar panels gone. Okay. The other thing is the windmills. Again, the same story, like changing the whole land to something with all these winds. And there are like reports of how many birds get killed. And then they say, okay, millions of birds get killed. It's very comparable to the amount that they get killed by the cars. But hey, it's like, if the cars can kill, I can kill people. So that's kind of a logic behind it. But again, these are also made of plastics. And then when these are very big, actually, they're bigger than the 747 wing. The Boeing wing, and if they wanted to just carry it, they have to saw it, and then it's a very, very, very heavy procedure. And at the end, they will end up to the landfill, not in California,
New Jersey.
in Wyoming.
What is the life of after how many years?
30 years, I assume. The same as solar panels.
They're not recyclable.
No recyclable. The only pathway, and again, this report is the Bloomberg report on where they end up. And as you can see the truck and the behind my name, actually, I'm covering the truck. I'm covering the part of the fact. So basically they're buried in a surface. It's not like deep mining. It's basically on a surface. Okay, and we can assume how much of the environmental issue this brings. So having all this, we wanted to say that it's not just, okay, let's put solar panels everywhere. Let's make the windmills and our problem is gone. We're not burning anything. That's not the case. We need energy. So we need to come up with that. If there is another proposal, it should be comparable with the amount of energy requirement and not requirements, the cost and scalability and all those discussions, also the new environmental impacts. And this discussion, we didn't talk about how the cadmium, lithium has been mined and brought to make from the first place these solar panels, okay? So because of that, actually I'm working on a new book, advertisement here, will be released in 2025 on the energy sustainability with a couple of other colleagues from Texas A&M, Professor Ben Ebenhart, and this is basically from his talk I borrowed, which basically energy transition will be both necessary and inevitable. Environmental issues dictate change, and the finite nature of fossil fuels will make transitions inevitable. Because again, fossil fuels you're consuming those. So at one point, we get to the point that the well is not going to produce hundreds of barrels of oil. Okay. So because of all this, it will be neither be an easy nor a straightforward move from point A to point B. So that's why I'm not interested with the transition. When you're talking about transition, it means you are at point A and you're transiting to point B. You are at the fossil fuels, now you're transiting to solar or wind. That's not gonna help us. That's not gonna solve our problem. So there are lots of proposals, lots of FOAs out talking about energy transition. But what we prefer is energy mix. You need to find a way to mix and match to meet the demand, cut the price, and take care of the environment. So, so for this, what people have done. How much time?
You're doing fine.
Okay, so the Paris Agreement basically started 2015, signed 2016, was a big move toward the approving that there is a problem called climate change. There were a couple of goals, short, long-term goals. The short-term goal was to limit the temperature increase by 2 degrees C by 2019. The hope is to be able to make it 1.5 degrees. Okay. We don't want to go above that. They said, okay, let's make sure where we are, let's stay where we are. At most 1 degree, 1.5 degree, or 2 degrees C. And we don't want to go above that. The long-term objective was to somehow reach to some sort of a neutral carbon balance, which means the amount of CO2 that we are putting in the air, we should be able to get exactly the same amount of CO2 and store it somewhere to keep the whole balance of the carbon in the world. So how do they track this? So the countries, they came together and they signed the agreements, they promised to do this and that. And like United States, we signed it, we were in it, and then with the President Trump, when he came, just came out of it, and then we went in it again, and we are waiting to see if you're going to stay in it or we're going to come out of it. So there's a climate action tracker. Actually, there's links here, and I had it. So because of time, I'm not going to go through it. But if you click on that, the climate action tracker, you can also go to every country, even Iran. Click on it, and it shows how well the country is doing in terms of their commitment to the Paris Agreement, how much effort they have put to battle with this climate change and all that. So it's good information. Which, but the thing that I can summarize here is This is critically insufficient, and we are right in the center of that critically insufficient effort. And then there are highly insufficient effort, and then there are insufficient effort, and there are good, which I cannot find anybody. So, and in line to that, I didn't put this, but there was another summit last year in UAE. And in that summit, at least the good thing was the oil producers, the Middle Eastern countries, the Arabian countries, they understand the problem, and they have some sort of a language in the contract which says they're gonna limit the oil and gas application and fossil fuels. There wasn't any language regarding the fossil fuels in the power sector. But at least now they understand the problem, and they put a language that they're gonna limit that. But how much and how? In billions of tons of billions of barrels of oil, am I going to drop 100 and say I did limit it? Or in what extent? So these are the things that's not clear. Okay. The other thing is, as I said, this is basically the amount of the CO2 that already been produced. And then when they set the 1.5 or 2.2 degrees Celsius, then it comes up with the what they call carbon credit, not the carbon credit. It gives us the carbon budget of the world. Basically, they say, if I wanted to stay less than 2 degrees C increase in temperature, how much CO2 I can emit? It says, okay, you are a little more than 3,000 gigatons of CO2. Okay, how much I have emitted now? About 2.5. So 2.5 to 3.2. So you have around 700 gigatons to emit. So we are still good. So the idea is, while you have this quotient, you need to implement something, some regulations to make sure you're not passing that. And again, for that, there is a link here. If you click on the link, it takes you to the website that gives you on a, if you have time, I'll do that at the end of the presentation. On a second by second, how much CO2 will be released, how much tons of CO2, 1,337 tons of CO2 per second being released in the atmosphere at the time that I took this screenshot. And then the amount, the year, we have 24 years. If we go with this rate to reach that 2 degrees C, if I change that to 1.5 degrees C, this drops to 4 years. So if somebody says we're going to reach 1.5 degrees C increased temperature, then it means you have 4 years to do whatever you wanted to do to meet the energy demand, to come up with all those technologies implemented in life. If you're talking about 2 degrees, then you have 24 years. So this is the
These predictions are based on model, right?
No, this is the measurement.
It's actual measurement.
This is the actual measurement.
No, not instantaneous measurement, but measurement based on history.
No, this amount is the CO2 emissions that they are collecting from the sites all around the world.
Okay.
And they see how much of the CO2 emission goes up
Real-time data.
on a real
Okay,
time
real
basis.
data.
So that's why what I said, if you go to this website, the carbon budget of the atmosphere, it gives you on a second basis how much of the CO2 goes and how much time we have. So future with 100% renewable environmental organizations are advocating this, but is it practically feasible? That's a question. And because fossil fuels, including coal, oil, natural gas, take 83% of the world primary energy. Even with this 83%, 1.2 billion people still they don't have access to electricity. 2.7 billion, they don't even have the access to the clean cooking. They cannot cook. They just take the woods and they burn it to make the food. So there's a huge discrepancy between somebody sitting in the United States talking about climate change, taking a role, doing all these good things, energy transition, putting ban in production of oil and gas or coal, and somebody who is living in Africa and struggling to find the wood to burn. So is it really ethical to deny access of billions of people to fossil fuels, which is cheaper, easier, and more accessible, and we know how to deal with it, to go and start looking at, let's say, solar or wind, or batteries, which you don't have much of a good understanding. Okay, just let me know when you guys are tired.
No, this
So how do we do this? Okay, this is the problem. I got it. But how do I make this correct? Okay. So as I said, like the government is the first step, right? If the government doesn't have a good regulations, then basically the rest is not gonna fall in. It's not gonna fall. It's not just gonna, everything's gonna fall apart. So the regulations, and we have a history of it. There are at least 3 major types of regulations for the carbon that can be done. One is called carbon tax system, which basically the government says, okay, whoever wants to use fossil fuels or any energy and generate the CO2 or any type of greenhouse gases has to pay tax. They call it pollution tax. And then what this does, this basically increases the cost of using the fossil fuels. So when it increases the cost, then the companies are not going to take it, right? If it costs me to produce 1 barrel of oil, $50, I'm not going to sell it for $20. I'm going to sell it $80, right? So the weight goes on the customers. So the customers, they have to pay that. And then but the idea was to make this so expensive that the customers start willing to change and then force the producers to change. So this is something like, okay, I know the problem, I'm gonna drop it on the shoulder of the society. You guys take care of it. And I'm taking the taxes. So I think it's just get aware. The people, they come up with the government to take care of the problems. But hey, again, we have good also practices of this. Like in Finland, in 1990, they started, or Sweden, a good example of how this can be regulated and can work to reduce the CO2 emissions. The other one is a cap and trade, where basically the government says, okay, I'm gonna set a cap. Chevron can produce, let's say, X 10 million tons of CO2 per day. Exxon can do this much. And so you put a cap, and then you say, if you pass that cap, then you will be penalized, and then you will be taxed. But if you don't pass that cap, you have an opportunity to sell your credit. So let's say I'm Chevron, I got 10 million tons of CO2. I'm not going to use it. I'm going to go work for clean energies. I'm just using 8 million. So I have 2 million credit. I'm going to sell it to Schlumberger, who's doing more. So this way, the companies start seeing some incentives, some promotion to go toward that and trying to cut that. But again, there are questions because the government again sets the cap. What if this government sets a huge cap? The cap could be free or it could be an auction. So again, they see it as a government making money. But again, that money obviously will go and will help the taxpayers because this comes from the companies, not from the people. Okay. And then the last one is a voluntary carbon market, which is basically every company voluntarily comes to this market and start doing this carbon emissions. How they do it, there are agencies, they define the projects. Let's say, just go and cut your emission from, let's say, that flare. If you do that, how much flare you have, this much, how much you're gonna eliminate this much, so you get this much of the credit. You got that credit, you can go and sell it to the companies. So there are lots of processes like this, lots of organizations. Actually, India, they started this far before Paris Agreement. And they're making those credits and they're selling the credits into the market. This shows how much these carbon credits has increased the value of them in years based on the interest of the market. And actually, comes from the New York Times, which says the carbon market is expected to become the world's biggest commodity market and looking to be $1 trillion industry very soon. So because everybody is going through that, then there will be a market which is right now in the Europe, there are like so many other exchange markets that you can sell the CO2 credit or you can buy the carbon credit, and people are doing that. So that's one way of regularization, how the government can put the rules and mitigate these. And there are some things that we cannot deal, or it's very hard. There are some industries we call it hard to decarbonize. It's not just energy consumption. Okay, one of them is steel. Okay, we use steel almost everywhere. The amount of steel that we are producing is 1.5 billion tons per year. Actually, people are grading the countries based on the amount of steel they're producing. The wealth of the country based on the amount of steel they're producing. Okay, so 1.5 billion tons per year we are producing. For every ton of steel, 1.5 to 3 tons of CO2 gets emitted. How do we make steel? We coke the coal. Okay, so again, we cannot get it from the other way. We need to find a replacement for steel if you don't want to use it. So, but if you look at RPSEA, there is a facility in United Arab Emirates, which is the first facility that's using the carbon capture and sequestration for the steel industry. So just that company, just that application on the steel industry, if we regularize it for all these in this industry, the amount of CO2 emission that we cut is 3 times 1.5 billion tons of CO2 per year. Okay. But again, this is one of those industries very hard. So I'm trying to say, it's not just trying to avoid this. There are ways to capture this, store the CO2, or reuse this. They call it carbon capture, utilization, and storage, CCUS. Carbon capture, utilization, and storage. And this is one of the things. The cement, another industry. Over 4 billion tons of cements are manufactured every year. 4 billion. And for every ton of cement, we have almost 1 ton of CO2 emitted, 800 kilograms emitted. So every year we have almost 3 billion tons of CO2 just from the cement. Again, we need cement. All the constructions are dependent on cement. Where it comes from the calcite carbonate. There is no replacement for it. That's a material. Okay. What else? Chemical industry, fertilizers. Again, 1.3 tons of CO2 per ton of primary chemicals. And you can see the factories, like how much of CO2, all these are CO2 emissions. And you see the worst one was from the steel, not just because of the lights, but because of the amount. But again, we see that chemicals, fertilizers, they use that for agriculture purposes. The whole society depends on the food, right? Food market. So we cannot back on that. So it's not just about cutting and cutting and cutting. It's about finding a solution. And the solution for that is the CO2 capture technology. That's what at least I do. You can capture the CO2 exactly like you are generating garbage. You're putting it out every week. Somebody comes, take it out, and go and do the recycling. Why we can recycle the CO2? We do have technologies. There are at least three well-developed applied technologies for the carbon capture. The post-combustion capture is the most famous one, which basically says, okay, I have this. I'll get this furnace and I put it inside the solution, amine solution, let's say, or I pass it through the membrane and I capture the CO2 and then I leave the rest go. And when I capture the CO2, I compress it, make it like a liquid. We call it supercritical CO2. And then we're going to go store it. Where? We're going to store it down the ground in the depleted oil and gas reservoirs, in the aquifers, in the deep aquifers, like 7,000, 8,000 feet down. Our water resources are all around less than 2,000, the deepest. You're going to go 7,000, 8,000 feet down to store all those. How do I know I can store all those amounts? See, we're talking about billions of tons of CO2 coming from industry, from CO2, from cement, from steel, from concrete, all that. But I cannot make a storage at the surface and store those. These are gigantic amounts. These are in the order of like oil and gas that we are producing. So the best place to set it is when you are setting it down. People are talking about the application, reuse of CO2, which is not going to help. Let's say I take this CO2, I make some cups, CO2 cups. What's going to happen to that CO2 cup? You're going to drink it and then you're going to dispose it, and it's going to come back to the atmosphere. The sequestration means if you can avoid the entrance of the CO2 to the atmosphere by at least 1,000 years. If you cannot store it for 1,000 years, it means we are not sequestering this.
But it is economic.
No.
It is economic.
It is economical because we already have the wells, we already produce the
Oh,
oil.
but they are injection facility.
Again,
Transportation.
you have the pipelines, right? You have pipelines that are transporting oil and gas from north to south, from Dominion goes all the way from the north to the south to Florida, and all that. The same type of pipelines can be repurposed for the CO2. You're producing with the pumps, the same can be used to inject the CO2 down the ground. Lots of infrastructure already there. Okay. And we will know about the drilling, we will know about the cementing, we will know about how to set these such that like oil and gas, they don't come out of the reservoir for more than hundreds of years. So this is one, the easiest one, which Canada is doing. Actually, one of the electricity generation in Saskatchewan, if you look, is actually going 100% CO2. They capture the CO2, they store it under the ground, and they're also actually using it for what we call CO2 enhanced oil recovery. So they inject under the ground, they increase the CO2 production as well. And actually that's how they could able to do it, because they need to get money somehow. So they use the increase in the oil production profit to maintain all this. So there are ways of doing that. Other technologies like oxy-fuel combustion, it's more technical, which basically says when you're burning, just don't burn it with air. Don't burn the gas with air. Don't burn the petroleum with air, because it's just going to generate so much CO2. Burn it with oxygen. So when you burn it with oxygen, the concentration of the CO2 that you are generating is much, much higher. So the cost of capturing that is much, much lower. It's like if you have a glass which has 10% CO2 and you wanted to clean it, so you will still have 90% to take care of, and it's going to pass through your system anyways. But if you can make it such that the glass is 100% CO2, then you don't need to worry about the waste. So it makes it more efficient. So the oxy-fuel combustion proposes using oxygen for burning the fuel instead of CO2. And the pre-combustion is basically saying that it's not burning the fuel, just convert the fuel to hydrogen, because what is hydrocarbon? It's a carbon and hydrogen. If I can break it, I can extract the hydrogen and burn the hydrogen. So that's another way of doing it. There are some statistics on how different countries doing and how much of that is being stored in the saline and the aquifers. Like US has a little bit of the storage capacity. This is 1 million tons of CO2, less than 7 million tons of CO2 already stored, but the capacity could be all to 10 million tons of CO2 being stored under the ground. And two possible response: leave the fossil fuels under the ground when the carbon budget has been used. Over the last few years, this has led to a growing movement of divestment from fossil fuels. Don't invest in oil and gas, don't invest in fossil fuels, cut the production. The other response would be look on carbon capture, utilization, and storage. And hopefully with that, you will be able to mitigate the CO2 or any other greenhouse gas emissions. And also we can look at evolving energy mix, and that will help us to meet the demand, cut the price. And with that, thank you so much.
Thank you very nice talk, Mamnoon. So,
خیلی ممنون. فارسی صحبت کنیم. خیلی ممنون. Very interesting presentation. Very detailed. من این البته کانتنت پرزنتیشن عالیه بود. تیم پرزنتیشن با اینترنشنال کامیونیتی خیلی فاصله داره. در اینترنشنال کامیونیتی این داستان ترانزیشن خیلی is taken much more serious. سناریوهایی که الان میگیم اینترنشنال انرژی ایجنسی سناریوهای چیز رو پرزنت میکنه و تمام اینترنشنال فاینانشال ایجنسی ها با این سناریو کار میکنن. همه اینا در اصل بر اساس اینه که پروداکشن کول تقریبا به صورت سریع میفته، پروداکشن نفت به صورت ملایم میفته، پروداکشن گاسی مقداری پلاتو میکنه و بعد اونم بعد از مثلا 35 میفته و این حالت شما ملایم در این مورد بررسی میکنید probably much more realistic ولی definitely very different from the theme that the international community حتما اطلاع دارید که مثلا در چیز در ارتباط با این طرز فکر international financial institutions like the World Bank, like regional banks, none of them finance any gas project, none of them finance any coal project, none of them finance any oil. به خاطر اینکه خیلی تمرین ولی ریالیستیکلی سریس. حالا ببین این داستان کلایمت چنج البته میدونید همینطوری خیلی قشنگ شرح دادی واقعا که در ضمن اینکه پروژه در موردش خیلی متفاوته ولی ریالیستیکلی نیز ده مسئله کلایمت چنج. حالا اشکال عمده‌ای که الان وجود داره اینه که در دنیا تفاوت تفکر به این قضیه خیلی زیاده. یعنی تقریبا اونایی که ساینتیست هستن میدونن این داستان گلوبال وارمینگ و کلایمت چنج اینا از کامی همین که گفتید در سطح دریا چقدر میره بالا بنابراین چه سریسی شد. ولی شما وقتی نگاه میکنید که کیا واقعا در این زمینه صمیمی نمیتونن نیستن دست پرابلم. چون به امریکا نگاه میکنید یه حزب میره میاد یه ایزی رو میشه. بنابراین this is not real. میری بزرگترین تولید کننده انرژی چین رو نگاه میکنید. چینیا در اصل اینا تمام زندگیشون کول، بنابراین اصلا به کول تأثیر داشت. حالا بعد دیدن واقعا ندارن، شروع کردن ساپلیمنت کردن اینو با گاز و خیلی خیلی شدید با نوکلیر انرژی و بعد کاری که کردن اینا راجع به این سولار و مانگال اینا اصلا گوش نمی‌کردن تا یه مرتبه دیدن this is a business opportunity. از وقتی فهمیدن this is a business opportunity they jumped. ولی اعتماد ندارن اونجا دنبال پول. بنابراین به خاطر این حالا بکنن جهان. بعد شما میای توی میدل ایست مثلا عربستان الان یک سرصدای بزرگ چیز کرده که ما اصلا خودمون لیدر رینیوبل انرژی هستیم. ولی اینا در اصل داستانشون اینه که اینا میخوان اون فشاری که پشتشون هست در مورد اردن گاز این فشاره رو میخوان چیکار کنن بیارن پایین. بنابراین دارن یه لیپ سرویس میدن به چی ولی بعدم سینیکالی نیستن ولی با اینا کار میکنن. میدونم به شما اینا میخوان از این استراتژی تنها گروهی در این دنیا سینسیرن در مورد اروپایی ها یعنی they are willing to pay the cost, they are willing to go through the whole process. فقط یک نکته دیگه هم باید هم داره این داستان کاربون کپچر. این خب میدونی خیلی الان پروژه هست در این زمینه خود در خدمت ولی اولا خیلی اسمال اسکیل وقتی حساب کنید در مقابل چیزی که توی جایی بدید و دومی که هنوز این most cases is not economic right. دیدم که شما چقدر قشنگ شهری دیدید در یه جایی مثلا با CO2 میده نفت بفرستیدش، ولی در اصل این شرکت‌های نفتی این کار رو در عربستان و انگلیس کردن از اینا، ولی it's not easy and it's not economically attractive. اولین راه اصلیش حالا باز شما متخصصی بهتر از من می‌دونید، ولی راه اصلیش واقعا switch به renewable energy و that is where the main چیز پیش میاد. و فقط من بازم میگم international community طرز فکرشون با شما فرق میکنه. شما خیلی ملایم‌تر و ریالیستیک‌تر هستید، international community خیلی به
شما کامنت دارید؟
نه باید صحبت کنم و عالی هستن و من تایید میکنم خیلی از چیزهایی که مثلا UAE که اشاره کردم واقعا دارن هزینه میکنن تو اینا. در مورد ترانزیشن من پرابلمی که باش دارم اینه که چقدر واقعا طبق اون تیبلایی که نشون میده FCOE و SCOE چقدر هزینه های اینها با کار تکنولوژی چقدر هست و اینکه چقدر میتونه این دیمند رو جبران بکنه. هنوز به خاطر همین
language international مثل human rights wishful thinking نه که we going to transition مثل human rights والا مثل چارتر human rights شما دلتون میخواد اینجوری باشه، ولی این wishful thinking که ما داریم میریم، یعنی بیاید بریم با هم، خواهش میکنم بفرمایید اینجوری داریم.
البته من فکر می‌کنم تفاوت اساسی که ببین الان اگر این چارتای آینه اینترنشنال انگلیسی رو برداریم، الان همه اینا برای اویل و گاز و اینا بخواهیم. من فکر میکنم مسئله مهم اینه که شاید استاندارد دیوییشن که معمولا فکر میکنیم رنج ارور در اینا خیلی زیاده، چون اون چیزی که ممکنه بسیاری ولی رنج ارورش خیلی بیشتر از اون چیزی که معمولا توی پروفایل‌های انرژی فورکست
بسیار عالی. از کامنتاتون سوال آقای
چرا آقای ترامپ از این سیستم منفعت کار تو این قسمت چیه؟
خب میگم بستگی داره که شما خیلی پرکتیکال بخواید نگاه بکنید به موضوع و مثلا چیزی که من شنیدم حالا اینه که خب کلا گلوبال وارمینگ گلوباله. اوکی، خب ما الان نگاه میکنیم تو گرافا میبینیم که چاینا is a big factor. حالا چاینا بیاد مثلا فالو نکنه بعد یونایتد استیتس فالو کنه. If you burn the coal in United States or in China for the global warming it's going to be the same. مثلا جنگل‌های کانادا که سوختن بیشتر از کل مثلا راشا و ژاپن سیکونیت کردن. خب این میگه که چرا من باید هزینه شو بدم؟ چرا مردم آمریکا باید هزینه شو بدن امروز که ما بخوایم بریم گلوبال وارمینگ رو تریتش بکنیم، ولی از اون بر چاینا داره با چه سرعتی اکانومیش پیشرفت میکنه، همین الان هم ما تحت فشار هستیم، چجوری میخوایم با این رقابت بکنیم؟ حالا ما 10 سال دیگه بیایم بگیم که ما خیلی خوب کار کردیم، امیشنمون رو 50% کم کردیم، ولی sorry our people are on the street, we don't have work, our economy is collapsing because we are not producing energy and you have to import energy. یه چیزی که مثلا خیلی مهمه اینه که شما مثلا نگاه بکنید که شیل گاز، مارسالس شیل، بارنت، بهش میگن شیل بوم. این وقت اومد یعنی ما تونستیم از منابع میکال unconventional غیر معمول اولر گاز تولید بکنیم. یونایتد استیتس از بزرگترین ایمپورتر انرژی تبدیل شد به بزرگترین اکسپورتر انرژی. وقتی ما حالا میتونیم بزرگترین تولید کننده انرژی تو دنیا باشیم و من نمیگم کلایمت چینج مشکل بزرگی نیست، من میگم کلایمت چینج مشکل گلوباله. یک فکر گلوبالی نیاز داره. یک جامعه جهانی نیاز داره که همه بتونن بشینن اونجا و همه بتونن شعرشون رو بدن. وقتی همه شعرشون رو ندن، اونم خیلی پرکتیکاله. میگه که چرا من بدم؟ این ناتو میگه چرا من بیام پول ناتو رو بدم همه رو؟ آقا همتون عضو پولتون رو بذارید هر وقت شد ما هم سهمون رو میدیم. یعنی این باعث میشه که اکانومی این شورت تایم و به نفع مردم آمریکا باشه، ولی این لانگ ترم ممکنه به ضرر کل دنیا باشه. ولی خب این لانگ ترم ما فقط جزئی از کل دنیا هستیم. خب بقیه دنیا هم افریقا باشه دیگه.
نگاه کوتاه مدت در مقابل نگاه دراز مدت. آقای
یه سوال کوچیک بدم. انرژی اتمی هیچ جایگاهی نداره، نمیتونه جایگزین بشه اینقدر
به نظر من میتونه. به نظر من انرژی اتمی میتونه. ما اتمیک بیس دیسپوزال پرابلم داریم، چجوری مثلا میتونیم میخوایم دیل کنیم حالا با اون بیس اتمی. ولی پرسپشن جامعه، دید جامعه از اتمیک الان چرنوبیل، از اتمیک بمب هیروشیما. یعنی جامعه این ریسپشن رو نداره که بگم من یا الان چندین بیلیون دلار رو میذارم. حالا این دید من ویژن من اینه که چرا این نمیشه.
من یه نکته
رشته من این نیست.
من رشته انرژی سوپرفیزیک رفتم، ولی حداقل از زمانی که بحث گلوبال وارمینگ بیشتر شما نگاه میکنید داره یه مقدار نظرها تغییر میکنه و اونم مهمترین مسئلهش فقط بحث همون است که شما وقتی زایده هسته‌ای رو در کجا دفنش بکنید. اون مسئله مهم هستش. در امریکا یک مشکلی که الان شما داره، این آخرین ریاکتوری که درست کردن مال 30 سال پیش اینا، یعنی بخواید شما یه تیر بگیرید، یکی به اصطلاح پرمیت بگیرید، دولت فدرال یا استیت، شد 30 سال 40 سال میکشید و بعد آنچنان سیستمای سیفتی به قدری به اصطلاح ریدانده پروتکتیو اینا هستش که خرج یه ریاکتور در آمریکا آنچنان زیاد هست که در حد سرمایه گذاری واقعا نمی‌ذاره. ولی من حداقل در چیزهایی که من میخونم و اینها این هست که به تدریج داره این ذهن باز میشه، اینکه نسبت به این مسئله، اینکه آیا فرض کنین که شما نگاه میکنید به خطری که وجود داره در مورد گلوبال وارمینگ، مسائلی که وجود داره، این رو نگاه بکنید در مورد اینکه ممکن یک حادثه پیش بیاد که مثلا فرض کنید یک قطاری داره این چیزایی رو به صورت پسمانده به صورت چیز رو سوخت هسته‌ای رو جای حادثه ایجاد بشه، به هر حال یک حادثه ممکنه پیش بیاد، اون رو مقایسه بکنیم با واقعا ضررهایی که جای دیگه وجود داره. ولی حداقل در ذهن‌ها تا یه اندازه‌ای داره میشه. ولی توی امریکا مسئله اصلیش به خاطر لیگال سیستم اونهاش به قدری گرون هستش که میگم یه آخری که درست کردن که کجا بود، توی نیوهمشایر مال 30 سال 35 سال پیش. مسئله چرنوبیل که اصلا نوع ریاکتورش اصلا به کل فرق داشت. میگم فهم توی شما فرمودید دقیقاً لفری مایل آیلند اون اصلا کنتینمنت نداشت. الان ریاکتورها به این صورت نیستن، اینقدر چیزای بازی داره. یا مسئله ژاپن که میشونن به هر حال همه برمیگرده به اون کانسیل به اصطلاح اون نگاهی که مردم دارن.
ببین مسئله environmental aspect این خیلی کار تقریبا هر جایی که صورت میگیره یا خیلی سیفی استوریج میشه یا اینکه اگر هم هستیم در ایران همه مثلا یه دونه چیز هست کارمند هست اون سنشونی رو یه میبری بنابراین اون تقریبا قضیه خیلی مهم 100%. اون چیزی که واقعا مسئله است اکونومی است. یعنی اینکه شما در دنیا الان دو تا کشور هست، یکی کره است، یکی چین و حدودی هست. این سه تا کشور وقتی میخوایم یه کار بسازن در عرض 5 سال، در این 5 سال اکونومی وارد. ولی اگر تو 15 سال دیگه ایزنات اکونومی وارد و این تقریبا اکونومی داری هی داره این تقریبا چی کنه و در دقیقت هزینه میره بالا. حالا غیر از این سه تا کشور درست کرده هر کشوری تاچ میکنه الان میره مثلا 7 سال 10 سال 19 سال در امریکا به خاطر رگولیشن این مسئله خیلی طولانی، بنابراین ایران بود. در ایران یه ultimate inefficiency که شما میتونید تصور بکنید. ایران در الان یه نوکلیر پلنت داره که 1000 مگاوات داره. این نوکلیر پلنت 3% الکتریسیته ایران رو تامین میکنه. هزینه تموم شده این 3% از 97% دیگه بالاتر. یعنی میتونه اینقدر اینفیشنسی وجود داشته بنابراین خیلی یه مرتبه این رنج رو که میدونن میکشن کنار. This is not for me.
سوال آقای بخشید شما و بعدم
سوال من قدری غیر تخصصی سولار انرژی گفتیم و خطرات فروش داری که دارم، ولی خب این دولت خیلی تبدیل میکنه و برن مقاصد بدون خطرات سولاری قدری بیشتر آگاه باید
آره حتما خطراتش فقط به این محدود نمیشه که شما سولار پنل دارید و ممکنه مثلا تورنیدو بیاد و اینو به هم بزنه یا خراب بکنه یا آلوده بکنه. الان مثلا استیت اوهایو شدیداً داره پس میزنه هیچ پروژه های سولار، برای اینکه اینها وقتی شما اینا رو سولارا رو وقتی میذارن خود اون سیستمی که میخواد از این انرژی رو بگیره و دیستریبیوت بکنه اون خودش انقدر آلودگی صوتی ایجاد میکنه و آلودگی گرمایشی ایجاد میکنه که اصلا راضی نیست کسی این اصلا نزدیک لندش اینو قرار بدن. یعنی یه شدیداً بک دارن میکنن که این یعنی فقط اون نیست. شما خیلی از اینها توی تئوری آره قشنگه و خیلی هم همچون آقای دکتر گفتن مثلا نگاه میکنیم نوکلیر $80 تو آمریکا ورسس مثلا $40 که نشال گسه دبل، ولی وقتی که میاد دیگه به ایمپلمنتیشن برسه، به کار برسه و به پروداکشن برسه، اون وقتی که تازه شما متوجه میشی مشکلات اصلی چجوری یکی پیش میاد. یعنی تو هر کدوم از این پلن ها همونش که آقای دکتر گفتن اون کانتینجنسی پلنشون اون چی میشه اگه اینجوری نشهش اینقدر بزرگه که اوورکام میکنه کل خود پروژه رو، به همین خاطر هیچ کس نمیره. یعنی این 4-5 سال گذشته که میگم من خودم بیشتر کارام و پروژه‌ام توی جیوترمال و سیتی و اینا بوده، ولی الان که مثلا ما به این پی فرما که نگاه میکنیم اینوستمنت بیشتر این پی فرما الان دوره برگشته، حداقل تو یونایتد استیتس برگشته تو اویل اند گاز. یکی که به احتمال زیاد پروجکشنشون اینه که we're gonna have different government و اونه maybe، ولی چیزی که هست اینه که این تکنولوژی ها یکی که همون که دیمند رو نمیتونن بگن. یعنی هر کدوم جیوترمال که نگاه میکنیم حتما میکس با سولاره و میکس با ویند داره. هر کدوم اینا رو که نگاه میکنیم یه میکسی از انرژی هستن، به خاطر اینکه همش گفتم کلید ندارن خاموش روشنش کنیم و انرژی دیمند انرژی یه چیز کانتینیوسه و اینه که مشکلاتش خیلی بیشتر از اون انوایرمنتال و هر کدومشون. شما اول بعدش ببرید.
من اول تشکر میکنم به خاطر بلرینت که از نظر من آقای دکتر اشاره کردن. بله آقای دکتر اشاره کردن که شما خیلی ساخت و خیلی اون قشنگ توضیح دادید که سخت‌تر از اینه، ولی برای من یک فرد عادی غیر متخصص این اطلاعات خیلی زیاد بود، خیلی هم وحشتناکی بود هم خیلی من سوالم اینه که آیا من به عنوان یک بشر، به عنوان یک افراد معمولی یا یک شهروند، آیا وقتی اینا رو ما میشنویم به فکر کنیم؟ شما گفتین گلوبال جهانیه، باید کانتری ها بشینن، گاورنمنت ها بشینن فکر کنن در این مورد تصمیم بگیرن، ساینتیست کلا کنن. من به عنوان یک بشر، به عنوان یک شهروند آیا واقعا میتونم کاری بکنم در این ارتباط یا نه؟ چون به فکر فرو میرم دیگه.
خب این باز دوباره
چون شما
چند بچه
اشاره کردیم حالا چرا خاموش کنید اثری نداره.
این چند وجه داره. یه وجهش اینه که خب بالاخره این گلوبال هم از اعضای کوچکتری درست شده. کشورها هستن، بعد شهرها هستن، بعد انسان‌ها داخل خانواده‌ها و انسان‌ها و بعد دیگه یعنی نهایتش به فرد میرسه. به عنوان فرد نگاه بکنیم خب به هر حال اگه همه افراد شروع کنن اون کانتریبیوشنشون رو انجام بدن در نهایت یه جواب بزرگتری، یه جوابی قابل حس کردنی ملموسی میشه بهش رسید. ولی مشکل اینه که توی دنیای واقعی توی پرکتیکال همچین چیزی احتمال اتفاق افتادنش خیلی کم. احتمال این که شما بگید که همه بیا روزه بگیرن پس ما غذا کم بخوریم و از مشکل فود کم بشه، این هست و شده. مثلا شما برید نگاه بکنید تو کشورهای مختلف این اتفاق افتاده که مثلا سنگاپور چجوری سنگاپور شده، مثلا که چجوری یه سیاست‌های اینجوری جواب داده و مردم واقعا همه اومدن گفتن که ما از امروز این کارو می‌کنیم، حتی همه چیز رو من می‌گیم این اتفاق افتاده. ولی تو اینا خیلی ضرب المثلی هستن، خیلی نمیشه تو اون اسکیل بزرگ بهش اعتماد کرد. چیزی که به اسکیل بزرگ اعتماد میشه کرد اینه که چه چیزی جوابگوی نیاز ما هست و جوابگوی نیاز فرزندان ما هست، حداقل تا اون اسکیلی که ما میتونیم ببینیم. و آیا این سیاستایی که شما میذارید با همه همش آقای دکتر گفتن اون استاندارد دیوییشن وریشن که ممکن اتفاق بیفته، حالا شما بت میکنید پولت رو یه جایی که ممکنه حالا 50 سال دیگه معلومه نیست جواب بده یا نده، ولی خودت و خانواده‌ت همه سافر بشن که اون حالا بشه یا نشه. این اونجاییه که خیلی تریکی میشه و اینجاست که من خودم نظرم اینه که من میگم سوالو باید اینجوری من حل میکنم. میگم چی میخوایم، انرژی میخوایم، چه جوری میخوایم، با چه قیمتی میخوایم، تیبلا رو نگاه میکنیم، خیلی پرکتیکال. نه اینکه حالا من به امید این باشم که یه نفر دیگه تو خیابون میرم خوب رعایت بکنه. سعی میکنم که همه چیز به دست خودم داشته باشم. یعنی شما به عنوان گاورمنت باید طوری برخورد بکنید که بتونید اون عوامل خارجی رو هر چقدر میتونی کمش کنید. نه اینکه امید به این داشته باشی که حالا همه بیان تو سازمان ملل بشینن و امید اینو داشته باشی که همه رأی بدن هیچ کس هم به تو نکنه. و این از این جهته. ولی به عنوان شخصی هم فردی هم در خارج از اونم میشه نگاه کرد حالا این اولین مشکل دنیا نبود، آخرین مشکل دنیا هم نخواهد بود. شما برگردی 1950 رو نگاه بکنید روزنامه‌هاشو میگن تا سال 2000 نصف جمعیت دنیا از بین رفت و همه جا بیابان شد و رفت پیکار شد یا فود غذا پیدا نشد و همه مردن و هیچ کس هم نمورد و هم زندگیشون کنن. یعنی نوع بشر خودش خیلی به نظر من اجاستبله و این دنیا هم خیلی اجاستبله. یعنی حالا ممکنه اونجوری هم بهش نگاه کرد برای اینکه آدم راحت‌تر زندگی بکنه. حالا
خیلی متشکرم. من که بروت نمی‌دونم شما
من فقط می‌خواستم ببینم قبلا ما می‌خوندیم در مورد یک انرژی پاک از جذب و نقل و گرانتی بین ماه و زمین. این فکر می‌کنم بریتیش پترولیوم و نروژ هم خیلی سرمایه‌گذاری روش کردن. این هیچ جایی نداره تو این
اصلا هستن. مثلا شما ببینید خود کالیفرنیا مثلا میان یه سری پلاستیک بال درست میکنن که اینا وقتی میذارن با حرکت آب الکتریسیته ساکن درست میکنن و اینو جمع آوری میکنن. میشه اینا هستن و دایرکت ایر کپچر و نمیدونم چیزای دیگه همه چی هستن اینا که پروپوزالایی که هستن. ولی وقتی شما اون مقیاس مصرف انرژی رو تو دنیا دارید نگاه می‌کنید، این میشه که بیشتر آدمایی که رفتن تو UAE برای کلایمت چنج با جت شخصی رفتن و صحبت میکنن از اینکه دارن اگینست. خب ببین یعنی اون دقیقاً همین تضاد دیگه، تضاد بین این که
اینا همین لایف استایل برمیگرده به اون صحبت. لایف استایل مثل ریسایکلینگ همیشه میگفتن امکان نداره، ولی کلایمت یه جوری شد که مکدونالد مجبور شد به دیمند مردم جواب بده. یعنی همین مثلا که میگید یعنی پولیتیکلی اینکورکت شد که شما تو خیابون یا ریسایکل نکنید. من یادم میاد این بحث که بود راجع به ریسایکلینگ، همین بحث بود چرا من با این کارو بکنم، چه تأثیری میذاره. ولی خب خورده همینا تاثیر گذاشته دیگه. یعنی فردم شروع میشه. یعنی این نیست که شما کاری نمیتونیم بکنیم. اینم خب مصرف آب.
چه کار بکنیم؟ یه کاری از این در میخوایم
والا هر کی سیگار کشید بذارید تو گوشش مثلا. سیگار هر کی سیگار کشید بذارید تو گوشش. CO2
اون انرژی ها هستن ولی توی پورتفولیوی انرژی مقدارشون در اون حدی نیستش که تاثیر شگرفی بذاره.
در اقتصاد البته میگن اکسترنالیتی. اکسترنالیتی یعنی که یه کاری برای جامعه خوبه، ولی من الان بگم من میتونم که جامعه من چیزی ندارم دیدم همه دارن میکنن وقتی اکرام
سوال بفرمایید شما.
اول خیلی ممنون، خیلی عالی بود پرزنتیشن. احتمالاً شما ستاره اول بود که من شدم نقش این گرمازی انسان این نیروهای آمی بدون چند تا مشکل می‌گذاریم. یعنی کنترل جمعیت تو کل زمین کمک می‌کنه یا چون صحبتی تو زمینه نمیشه که ما خودمون یه سورس عمده تولید انرژی طبیعی هست. حالا از هر جنبهش که بکنیم منهای اون آشپزی که می‌کنیم
گوشت نمی‌خوریم.
انجام میدیم.
گاوا رو بگید گاوا.
آرژانتین
این خیلی اصلا جمعیت یه مسئله خیلی مهمیه که تو خیلی از این مسائل دیگه میشه و خیلی مهمه که شما جمعیت رو حتما نظرتون باشه چقدر اثر میذاره. ولی خیلی بخوام کلی جواب بدم من خیلی سریع ازش گذشتم. یه ترمی هست به عنوان کربن لایف سایکل، یعنی کربنی که ما تولید میکنیم نه فقط انسان که نیستش، خب همونجوری گفتن احشام هستن و ولکان‌ها آتشفشان‌ها هستن، جنگل‌ها هستن. تمام این سیستم هر چقدر طبیعی باشه، یعنی سیستم ازدیاد بشر با انقراض بقیه یک سری دیگه جبران میشه. یعنی چیزهای طبیعی حالا تیبلاش هستش و اسلایدش هم بود، من متأسفانه برداشتم، که نشون میده که در کل که نگاه میکنیم این بالانس خود گلوبال اینو بالانسش میکنه. توسط درخت‌ها جذب میشه، توسط آب دریا جذب میشه، بعد سمنتیشن میشه، بعد رسوب میکنه ته دریا پرمننتی میشه، میمونه CO2 به عنوان کربن کلسیم میمونه. یعنی این بخش انسانیش خیلی نچرالش خیلی چیزیه که خارج نمیکنه از توازن گرمایش شد. چیزی که خارج میکنه اون سوخت هایی که اضافه است، سوخت فسیلیه که ما داریم میسوزونیم. اونه که دیگه مقیاسش در حدیه که دیگه این درخت‌ها اینا جواب نمیدن. درخت‌ها همون زحمتشو بکشن ازدیاد بشر رو.
سوالش سوال کتاب من یک کار ببخشید
پس کنترل جمعیت خیلی مهمه چون همون نسبت نیاز برای سوخت اینا میاد پایین.
دقیقاً.
انرژی کمتر لازم داریم.
دقیقاً شما وقتی که پر کپیتال دارید وقتی کم می‌کنید جمعیت رو
مثل تقریبا 1/3 از 1/3 جمعیت دنیا میشه.
ولی خب میگم این باز دوباره خیلی جهت‌های مختلفی داره. شما کشور اروپایی نگاه بکنید رشد جمعیت منفی، کارگر کم میارن، مجبورن کارگر وارد بکنن، رشد اقتصاد کم میشه. یعنی فقط اینجوری نیستش که ما بگیم که پس بذارید همه تک فرزندی کنیم یا بدون فرزندی کنیم و جامعه همش درست میشه دیگه تعدادمون کمه، یا مثلا بگیم که درجه بندی کنیم. مثلا خب خیلی‌ها میکنن، خیلی‌ها درجه بندی میکنن. شما وقتی که وقتی من میشینم میگم با جت شخصی میرم میشینم تو سامیت گلوبال وارمینگ صحبت میکنم و امیشنی که من مصرف کردم تا بیام اونجا بندازیم کل مثلا یک کشور آفریقایی این دیگه خارج از این موضوع.
من اسلاید 19 تون دیگه من یه سوال دارم رو و یه کامل می‌خواستم بدم که آقای دکتر رضوی اشاره کردن و خواستم واقعا برام خیلی جالب. شما وقتی که شروع کردیم به صحبت من شما به صورت چی می‌کردم ارجاعی می‌کردم که شما نقطه نظرتون نسبت به مسائل انرژی گلوبال چطوره و اینقدر واقعا ماهرانه همچی گفتیم با آرامش اینا رو گفتیم که من فکر میکنم به خاطر که به هر حال شما توجیه‌های علمی اینا میرین، هستن کسایی که البته بعید میدونم که از لیدوس اینا بیان مثلا به صحبتاشون رو گوش کنن، ولی برای من بسیار جالب بود که یعنی کسی اونجا نشسته واقعا خلق اصلاح میکنه. یعنی با اینکه شما به هر حال دیتا رو اسلاید 4 و 5 نشون دادید، ولی جوری که شروع کردین گفتم که به نظر میاد که هیچ چیزی رو ممکن اصلا به خاطر کارتون انرژی و به اصطلاح از دانشگاه بودی گفتم که اجازه رو تموم کنم مطلب. برام خیلی جالب بود. خواستم بگم که روشتون بسیار عالی بود و واقعا تبریک میگم بهتون. من در مورد این سوال اینجا که به هر حال که انرژی به هر حال خواستم بگم که می‌خواستم
تو هر موقع من چه صحبت میکنه باید بفهم.
آره اینجا
اکس پرزیدنت
اجازه ما تموم بکنم. ببخشید شما اگه میخواد برید میتونید برید. هر شود که سوال اینجاست که این 52% یا 50% که پیش بینی کردن که انرژی دار میشه، این بر اساس چه مدلی؟ اینم مطمئنا چیز داره دیگه، دیوییشن داره. این بر اساس چه مدلی هست؟
همون EIA این دیتایی که من گرفتم مال EIA هستش، انرژی هستش.
یعنی شما میدونید چه بسیار بر اساس چه هستش که این بر اساس چه مدلی هستش؟
چیزی که آره خب مثلا هم مدل‌های خودشونو دارن، ولی چیزی که به صورت جنرالی میگن forecast های این دو تا ایجنسی including the technology advancement, government policies, population growth, energy demand, energy production. این که حالا دقیقاً چه مدلی رو استفاده کردن برای این و خیلی چیز جالبی، ولی باید نشون بدن واقعا ما با یه عدد دترمینیستیک روبرو نیستیم که بگیم حالا این 52% و 53% نیست و 51% نیست. ولی
خیلی متشکرم، ممنون. سوال اگه نیست